In the year 2000, the song Who Let the Dogs Out was a very popular song. When I got here to Chiang Mai, I asked that same question, who let the dogs out? There were so many dogs out around the corner whenever I went to walk my dog. And I asked myself, why isn't anyone doing anything about this? But once I took a closer look, I found out that there is organizations that are doing something about it. And today I go speak to one of the reps, part of Hands to Paw, and she's going to talk about the roaming dog situation here in Chiang Mai. Okay, what started out as a nice conversation in a quiet coffee house got pretty loud toward the end, and I apologize for the background noise, but I will put closed captions on there. And just to let you know also that I will have pictures up of dogs that went from being neglected to being well taken care of. So there are some sensitive pictures that will be on this video as well. I just wanted to warn you ahead of time. And thanks again for watching. Let's get into it. All right, so here I am with Amandine. And I talked about outside, I talked about how there are organizations that are doing things about it when we have what we consider a dog problem. So kind of introduce yourself to us.
Sure. So my name's Amandine. I help run Hand to Paw in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And I absolutely adore dogs. And I've been doing this now in Chiang Mai for almost 20 years.
Oh, wow. So one of the things when I interview people, I love their journey. And so when I was on the Facebook page, I saw France, and I saw UC Davis in California,
right.
And then boom, here's Thailand. So how did your journey start from, say, France to America?
Right. So I was born in France. My parents are French, and grew up there for a few years. And then my dad was engineer, so he got promoted to go to the U.S. just for a couple of years.
Okay.
So we went to the Silicon Valley, and it was only meant to be for 2 years, and then I think he fell in love with it, and so we stayed.
Okay.
So we were in California for quite a while, and then we moved to Texas. And then I went I didn't quite like Texas as much as California, so I went back to California to go to university.
So I'm going to assume that when you were in California, you did not major in dogs. So
No, there wasn't that major at that time. But wouldn't it have been cool?
That would have been. I would have got a master's degree if they had it.
Yeah, PhD actually.
Yeah.
Come on, let's go all the way.
But you, did you take counseling or?
Right. So my training is to be a therapist. So I had a bachelor's degree in counseling psychology, and then went on to earn a master's as well.
Okay.
And I was always really interested though in biology and chemistry, and so I took classes at university for that, but it was never with the intention of using it for dogs.
Right.
It was just because I liked it.
Yeah. So where did this passion for animals come from?
Well, when I was living in France, we lived in the mountains. So I grew up in Grenoble, which is at the base of the Alps, and then we moved up to the Alps. So I always had just this sense of connection to nature, and as a kid would spend a lot of times just watching just the other side of the mountains,
right.
And watching the snails and watching, and then we had a dog. So we rescued a dog, and I always felt like just a strong connection to him as well. But I think like my love for dogs at that point was pretty normal. Like it was just I appreciated animals. I had the dream of becoming a veterinarian, which I think quite a few people do, but I didn't really anticipate that I'd be, running a sanctuary or anything like that. I just had a pretty normal connection with animals, and it wasn't until I moved to Thailand, really, so initially I came to Thailand to volunteer with humans. I had graduated from UC Davis at the time, and I was working 2 jobs in San Francisco as a residential counselor with drug addicts, with people with like dual diagnosis, so bipolar and homeless. And I loved what I was doing, but I wanted to, my goal was really to go work in areas where there was a lot of underprivilege. So I wanted to go to Rwanda, I wanted to go to areas where there had been major catastrophes and help there. And so looking kind of globally, I thought the UN is there. So I thought, that's my goal. I'm gonna work for the United Nations.
Oh, wow.
And so I looked sort of on the website, like how do you get to work for the United Nations? And they essentially said you have to have 5 years grassroots experience and a master's. So I was working on getting the master's, and I just thought I want to work in grassroots. So I had a look kind of around, and I thought, I don't know, there was something that attracted me about the Buddhism in Thailand, and so I just thought, well, that feels like a safe place to kind of like enter. It wasn't Rwanda, it wasn't yet, but that's where I wanted to go to. But I think it freaked my family out, but I was like, I want to go to these places that have been destroyed.
Right, instability possibly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Thailand felt like a natural kind of like next step, and what Thailand had was like all the Burmese refugees, and so I wanted to start working and volunteering with Burmese refugees. So that's what I did. I actually showed up here. I quit my job in the States. I showed up really with a backpack, and I came here to volunteer with Burmese refugees, and I did that. I did that for 9 months. But along the way, like I'd go to the store and there'd be like a group of dogs. And so I did, I think, the typical sort of like tourist thing, which was like, oh my God, they're so cute. And then you bring food, and then like, oh, the mama dog has a litter, and then like, oh my God, they're so cute. And then when you do that regularly, you realize, well, there's one dog missing. What happened to the dog? So you talk to the security guard, and the dog got hit by a car. And then at one point, I think like the litter had parvo, so they started having like bloody diarrhea, something I'd never seen before. And then I realized that was all preventable. Like if the dogs had gotten vaccines, and that was prevented. So I watched the entire litter die in spite of going to the clinic. And then the mama just had another litter, a few months later. And so whilst I was doing all this work in San Francisco, and I loved it. I loved being a counselor, but it's such it's such a slow process. Even with people who really want to change, it's so slow. And I started helping dogs, and it was just this transformation. It was almost immediate. Like literally, I picked up the dog, I went to the clinic, I got it spayed, I got it vaccinated, and I brought it back, and its entire life from there on out was completely transformed. And I liked that feeling. And I really only intended to do it with a few, and I liked the feeling so much that I think I just did a few more, and a few more, and a few more. So I stayed in Thailand for about 9 months, and then along the way met 2 other women who were doing similar work, and we decided to start like the first shelter in Chiang Mai. And one of the women had a husband here who, like, he had a really good job, so she was going to stay here, and then the other woman she was working as well, so they were going to stay here and be the people who ran it, and then I had to go back to the States to earn some money, but like we helped each other out as much as possible, so they ran it. and then I would come back and just say, go on holiday. Like I'll take over.
So how was that process as far as, I mean, did you have to go to government officials and say, hey, look, we want to open a shelter? I mean, was it, as a foreigner, was it tough to get that process going?
So I think initially, not so much. Like initially, we really just, what we did was, I was renting this little farmer's house on like a big property, and we just built a fence around it.
Oh, okay.
And the goal was always, we're going to keep it small.
Yeah.
Like 30 dogs maximum. It'll essentially be an adoption center.
I see.
We'll bring in the females to get them sterilized. We'll put them back where they were, and then the puppies will adopt out.
Okay.
But as I've seen countless times, like you just want to be small, but then just the need is so big,
right.
And it ends up, you end up taking more and more dogs in, and having to do more and more. So after a while, when we realized it was working and the community really had a need for it, and people were coming in and adopting, then we registered as a foundation. And yes, being foreigners, entirely foreigners, it's a difficult process. You do have to make sure that like you have people who are Thais who are also willing to join with you, and right. Make sure that it's not just a foreigner. Even here, like like it's on the Facebook page, it's like the page really where I do the fundraising. Like that's more like there's pictures of me, there's pictures of the work that we're doing, but we have a Thai page, and that I try to make sure that I'm not necessarily on it, that I wanted to have a Thai face, a Thai interface as well. I think that it's really important for Thais to feel a sense of identity with this, and
they're vested as well.
Right.
Yeah.
That it's not just like, oh, it's the foreigners coming in,
right.
And like, well, we do it that way back home, and so we want to do it here the same.
Right.
I really want it to just be, for us to really just be able to say like, this works. If you like how it works, then we'll help with resources. We'll help with labor. We'll help with the passion.
Right. Now I see that depending on what Google page you get on, there's so many numbers out there of the thousands of roaming dogs here in Thailand, and specifically in Chiang Mai. I know when I arrived and we would go for walks, it's like every corner there was a pack of dogs somewhere. And at first glance, a person can say that those can be a nuisance, so to speak. But what is the problem with overpopulation of dogs? What kind of problems can that cause for not just dogs but for humans?
Right. I mean, in general, like overpopulation of dogs, what you end up seeing is because then there's so many dogs, people don't get attached to them. Like they're just, so I feel like a lot of people, like a lot of Thais, for example, will see these dogs almost like as we might see rats. Like they're pests more than they are pets. And that will create problems because people will want to get rid of them, but they're not wanting to take them to be sterilized to do that, so they'll put poison down, there'll be pullings, or people will pick up rocks and then throw them.
Just to chase them away, or
chase them, or like shoot at them. Like we have so many times when we go to do x-rays, like a dog gets a broken bone and we do a set of x-rays, and like the dog has pellets lodged in. We had a dog with like ripped testicles because somebody, like the dog was friendly enough to approach whoever did this, and then they got shot in the testicles. So I think there's animosity that can develop towards the dogs, and so which isn't good. And then of course, like the animosity, I think leads people to do things to the dogs, and then the dogs get scared of people, and then there's like aggravated tensions that can happen. Amongst the dogs, of course, and there's fighting for resources. So this is why I think like spaying is so important, and why we also focus mostly on the females, because in a population, so imagine you have like a group of 10 dogs. If you have 2 females and 8 males, some people might say, but it's cheaper to do the males, so just do all the males. But the problem is the female in heat, even if the males are sterilized, they're still going to fight over her. So in a population of 10, if there's 2 females, I will always focus in on doing the 2 females.
Right.
And then immediately you reduce the fighting that'll happen. So even if the males are unsterilized, they won't impregnate the females anymore because the females are sterilized.
Right.
But then 2, they're not going to go into, the females aren't going to go into heat. So then you avoid all of this, like,
That makes
the
sense.
horrible ones. I mean, like, really horrible, tremendous wounds that are life-threatening.
Yeah.
And also, that's the nuisance that can also happen, is in an area where all of a sudden you have a female in heat, there are sometimes like up to 10 males that'll just follow the female around for days trying to have access to her. So if you're like a villager who's trying to sleep, and then the dogs are just fighting.
Yeah.
They're fighting. So we're trying to reduce that. So if we sterilize the female, then all of a sudden that stops. The fighting stops. It gets reduced at least. And then you have that. You avoid a lot of the pitfalls. But yeah, and then even driving, like traffic accidents.
Right.
The more dogs there are, the more dogs are crossing the road, the more accidents happen, the more paralyzed dogs are driving themselves. There's so many issues that can kind of like
Right.
happen.
I know sometimes, I think with dogs also, if they're afraid, they will attack also. So now if you get bit, you have to worry about rabies as a human. Those kind of things too can happen. I wanted to talk about numbers, and I know that on your Facebook page, you recently had some events where you sterilized a lot of dogs, which is going to be very impactful. Can you talk about one of those events?
Yeah, so almost every week we set up a sterilization event. So and we rotate through. So we're mostly in Chiang Mai district, but we'll rotate through Doi Saket, we'll do Sen Kampeng, we'll do Mae Rin, San Sai, and then also Mae Tang. So what we want to do is to make it as convenient as possible for people to bring the animals. So they can bring temple dogs, they can bring street dogs, they can bring their own dogs, not a problem. No questions asked, actually. If somebody can't afford to go to the vet clinic, we're not going to check. We just say, this is free, come and bring your animals. So we do get a grant from Soy Dog Foundation to help cover the dog stays, which is phenomenal. So for the last about 5 years, we've just been doing this like every single weekend, mass day events.
That is great.
And we've done up to 140 animals in one day.
Wow.
Yeah, in one day. But in general, we average about 60.
That is great.
So 60, and we try to focus primarily on females. So at least the majority of the spays are going to be about 90% females.
Okay.
Just so that we have the largest impact on population. And yeah, we get a team of doctors who will set up like in a round table situation. And then we've got a team of helpers so they're the vet assistants who will start giving the medications for the anesthesia for the dogs, and then they'll start clipping the hair, getting the dog prepped and everything, and then the dog will be presented in front of the doctor. The doctor will do the surgery, and then they'll go into a recovery area.
That's awesome.
And so the owners literally take the dog as soon as it starts to wake up. And yeah, we've been doing this for years and years. So we've just surpassed 15,000 spays. So we were talking a little earlier about the numbers all like in Thailand. You were saying about 700,000 to about 1.2 million. And I think the numbers in Chiang Mai district are about 70,000 roaming animals. So if you can imagine, we've done 15,000. We're not the only rescue group doing this. There's a couple of others who are also out there helping sterilize, and all of us combined are doing about 10,000 spays a year.
That's amazing.
And I see a huge impact.
Yeah.
Like, so compared to 2005 when I first arrived to now, It's a completely different situation. The only time I ever truly remember what it was like in Chiang Mai is when I go and I go and travel to Laos, for example, that doesn't have many spay groups, and all of a sudden I remember just like the wicked wounds and the cancers that you see, and because that's another thing too. There's a contagious cancer that gets transmitted through sexual contact called TBT, and a lot of times people don't even know about this because in like Western countries, the dogs aren't roaming. So even if like one dog might have it, they're not like spreading it. But here, because the dogs are out in the streets, they actually get an STD, which is a transmissible cancer that requires chemotherapy, and if they don't get it, they die. So all of that is something that we can like have an impact on when we sterilize. But yeah, so every year we're doing about 2,500 spays.
Okay.
So.
And that in itself is amazing, but I'm going to transition to something else that you do,
Sure.
the vaccinations. So why are vaccinations so important?
I think we forget how important they are until we go into an area that's unvaccinated, and then all of a sudden we just end up saying, like, if one dog gets distemper in an area, like I literally have seen the entire street of dogs end up dying because one dog. This is the thing, is that they have several days of full energy without any symptoms whilst they're still able to transmit it. So like a dog will catch like either parvo or distemper from the ground, from from contact with another dog, and then for days and days have all the energy in the world to go and sniff, play, and because they're roaming, they have loads and loads of contact, and then they start to get unwell, they retreat back home, then they die. But then in the meantime, they've contaminated a whole bunch of other animals. It's in the ground. There's also so much misinformation, and also just like a lot of people in the villages haven't necessarily even gone to high school. And so, for example, if they start to see their animal vomiting, they start to see their animal having diarrhea, and then the animal dies, what people will tell me is like, oh, it's because of the rains. It's because of something they ate. So they won't even realize that there is a contagious element to it. And so a lot of what I do is, like if I see an animal that's sick, I tend to ask, has any other animal been unwell? And then I'll try to teach, this is not because of the rains, it's not because of what you fed. This is because of like a contagious disease they got from another dog. They can pass it on to another dog. And the only prevention was the vaccine. And then the other thing is, you talked about the rabies. We're incredibly, I don't know if lucky is the word, because it's not about luck, but the government is really uber prepared here, and so they will, they don't do much about sterilizing, they don't do much about helping with distemper and parvo, but in terms of like rabies management, they do a whole lot.
Good.
So I've gone into areas where like the loudspeakers are going, saying the government's going to come and vaccinate your dog, be prepared, and then they'll go door to door. It was so cool. At one point we had a group of feral dogs to trap in the forest right outside an area, and I went there one day to just assess and just make sure that like everybody knew, like, don't feed the feral dogs because we're coming tomorrow, we're going to trap them. And the announcement in the loudspeakers was happening that they were about to give rabies vaccines. And the next day, we trapped the feral dogs in the forest, and a villager came out and said, the government gave extras for you to be able to give during the surgery.
Oh, that is so great.
So I feel in general, rabies is actually really not rabies is planned for, like rabies prevention is really planned for. The government does an incredible job, the rescue groups do an incredible job, and so rabies isn't a huge concern in Chiang Mai. We actually have, I think in Chiang Mai you're more likely to get hit by lightning and die than you are So just in terms of perspective.
No, that's great. That's great.
Still go to the clinic and get it.
Right,
you
right.
know, just in case.
And stay out of
Because you never know. Right. And don't antagonize dogs either.
Yeah.
But in general. However, this is the side issue. It's that the government will come and say, we vaccinated your dog, they'll vaccinate the dog. They'll only vaccinate against rabies. And then the people, though, feel like the dog is vaccinated against everything.
Oh.
And so when I ask when a dog starts to show symptoms of distemper, for example, I'll say, is the dog vaccinated? Almost every single time the villagers will tell me yes. And then my question is, who vaccinated? Did the government vaccinate or did the clinic vaccinate? That will tell me whether the dog is actually, and almost 100%, the villagers did not go to the clinic to get the dog vaccinated. The government came with the rabies vaccine. So the dog is now unvaccinated against every other thing. And so what we do is we also offer free vaccines. So during our spay events, we will have a side area where we've also invited the public to just come with their dogs, and then we will give the vaccine for free. So against distemper, against parvo, against rabies, they'll get a combination vaccine that has all of it. But people are interested in the rabies vaccine.
Yeah.
But it's like, fine,
No, that's an interesting
come
story.
for the rabies, get the distemper
everything
and
else.
parvo. Yeah.
Speaking of, you mentioned the government, but one of the things that I know is important is relationships. So you're going into these villages, you have to establish those relationships with the like the village mayors or you know the novice monks, those kind of people. Why is that so important to do that?
Right. I mean, there's always a sense that like everybody wants to be respected, and so if you come in, I think with a sense of like, and I see this happening, like especially with the people who are new to Chiang Mai or new to Thailand, they're like, they're doing it wrong, and then there's like a sense of like, don't you're doing it wrong. Okay, that'll never work. Nobody ever wants to be told that they're doing it wrong. People want to feel a sense of respect, and so to approach the village chiefs or the monks, and I almost always will start from the place of like what they're doing well. Like even if there's something that I want to help support, I will always kind of say like, I see that you really care about this. I see that this has already been done. I see, whatever it is, even if it's a small thing, like I'll point that out and I'll say, I would like to help even more. I would like to help your endeavors even more. And this is what I propose. Are you okay if I do this? But that respect and that community building is so important, especially too because they're the ones who tend to know more information about the rest of the village. Like the village head is the one who will know, that house has 10 cats that need to be sterilized, or that home has an aggressive dog on a chain that they keep like super tight in the back of the yard, and they might need some help with getting another setup, and also if the village head, especially the village head, can say, I have confidence in this. You should sign up for the spay. You should sign up for the vaccines. You should accept the help that's being given.
It carries more weight.
It carries more weight, right? Right.
So you're coming in as a resource, not as I'm coming in to take over.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So we've talked about the sterilization. We've talked about vaccines. What else we talk about? I want to get into feeding. So you feed a lot of dogs, your organization. It feeds a lot of dogs. What are we talking about here as far as what does it take to, every week, how many dogs do you think the organization feeds?
So we have 50 on site that we feed, and then we have over 100 dogs in temples that we feed, and then we have about 30 cats that we feed as well. So about 100, what is that? 180 about total.
That probably takes a lot of volunteers, right?
No, so what we'll do is like on site, so I have a lady who helps me, and then we'll both at our adoption center and then at our foundation. And at the temples, what we do is we ask the monks, so we'll deliver the food, and then the monks are the ones that give the food.
Yeah.
And the reason we do that is because we find a lot of the times the monks accept food from the public, and a lot of times that's also why like dogs are abandoned in temples, is because people think, oh, there'll be an oversupply of food there, and so the animals will get fed. But what we find is that like the food that's left out for the dogs is inappropriate for dogs. So it either has like garlic, it has spices, like spicy Thai food is sometimes put there. A lot of times it has like chicken bones. And then what happens is like it's left out in the sun, and so the amount of times I've walked into like a temple property and it's just covered in like maggots.
Oh yeah.
And then the monks may or may not notice that for a while.
Right.
So what we prefer is we just supplement with like just dog food, and then the dogs are healthy and probably have a lot less health issues as a result. So we do it that way. Outside of that, I have to say that like the Thai community is really awesome in terms of like there's so many like older Thai aunties who will cook food up at home, and then they'll have seed roaming dogs, and then they'll like put like bowls of food.
I see that all the time.
Right?
Yeah, in our village.
Right.
Yeah.
And so feeding in one respect is necessary in order to make sure the dogs aren't so anemic, for example, or all the rest. But in general, the dogs here are not going to starve, so that's a good thing. But yeah, it does take a lot of resources.
Right.
Like we currently we're ordering 1 ton of dog food every single month.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is a huge amount.
But and you know, this is why I'm glad we're having this conversation, because you know, sometimes we only see what's in front of us. You know, there's that problem right there, but we don't see how much work is going on, that there's solutions going on in the background. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation. One of the things that really caught my attention on your Facebook page is there were two different incidents that really caught my eye. One was there was one dog that had like an eye tumor, and just the before and after of that picture. I think another was when I think you were on your way somewhere and there was a dog that was hit by a car or something like that, and you picked up. So you come across a lot of probably medical incidents. Can you give me an example or a story or some of the things involving some of the medical procedures that some of these dogs have to go through?
Yeah. I mean, one of the sadness that I feel is a lot of the times the dogs here won't receive any prevention or any medical care. So they get food and that's it. So a dog is completely on its own if it gets distempered, completely on its own if it gets a tumor, completely on its own if it gets a wound. And so we do come across things that have been left to progress in ways that you just never would see in other parts of the world. So I've seen like the biggest tumors that that I ever would have imagined, or just maggots coming out of wounds that are now life-threatening. And yeah, a lot of the times I see it, and then because of the Facebook page too, like loads of people message me and say there's a dog in need here, there's a dog in need here. We're known both in the Thai community and the expat community, and so I get messages from both saying this dog needs help. And having done it for so long now, I feel pretty adept at knowing what can I really help with and what can I not. So there are times when like the cancer it's surpassed a point. Oftentimes, for example, if the cancer too has spread like all over and it's systemic, usually that's a sign that the cancer has metastasized, or is the type of cancer that's we're not going to be able to surgically cure it. But usually, just to make sure, what I'll do is I will hospitalize the dog for a few days until the biopsy results come back, and then just to give a chance. And part of what we will do if needed is to that's something, to be quite honest, like that is sometimes the biggest sadness that I've ever experienced, is when not when the dog is suffering and we can help, or the dog is suffering and we have to let it go.
Right.
It's when the dog is suffering and the people around it are saying we cannot euthanize. And then we end up having to just manage with the pain.
Right.
And that can be really, really sad, to just watch a dog having to experience that end of life, suffering from cancer, when you know that we could just help let go, but the beliefs around it are such that it's one of those things, again, going back to respect. Like, some people might say, well, why don't you just insist? Insisting might help that dog for the few days, but the problem is that it ruptures our relationship with the community. So, for example, if I insist, if I take the dog away and they know that I'm going to euthanize against their will, then they will never call me again. And then they will talk to every single person that they know about what happened. And then I lose that community relationship. So very humbly, what I try to do is just meet people where they're at, and then I say, how can I support? And then I will push a little bit, just to get a little bit more care, but I won't push to the extent of rupturing a relationship. And then there have been times where, we've supported dogs through the pain that they were going through with morphine. Like, I will go and seek out the medicines that the dog needs in order to help. But yeah, that's the things that are sometimes the heaviness that I can experience. Is just like when you see a dog and I'll say, like, how long has the dog, like, even mange, which is so simple to treat, just like one tablet can just eradicate the mange, and yet, like, sometimes we find dogs with just huge, and I'll say, like, how long has the dog been in this condition? It's 3 years. Or the cancer that I was talking about, this contagious cancer. I had this one case, I think at 10:30 at night, coming back from another rescue, I saw a dog with, like, the worst genital cancer I've ever seen. So, like, I stopped and I tried to find the owner, found the owner, and I'm like, I just need a phone number. Your phone number. Just like, give me your phone number. I'll figure it out tomorrow. But, like, and I asked them, like, how long did the dog have the cancer for? And they said for 3 years, 20 centimeters of cancer on this dog's genitals. And we've cured it.
Wow. But these are, you're speaking of, my story is, I was at a coffee house where Sherry goes also, and I saw this dog just scratching, itching rather with this, and Dana, my wife, said, well, we have, what's the pill called?
Bravecto.
Yeah. And so I gave one. I was back there 4 days later. It was a new dog.
Yes.
And so now I wrote down the date. And I know that every 2 months, I believe it is, I need to go give
even
another one.
More, yeah. Minimum
3 months. That's right. It's 3 months. But, just little things that we can do.
Yes.
But I'm seeing organizations like Hand to Paw and other organizations do it on such a big scale. And, it benefits everyone, and not just the animals, but it benefits the community at large. And so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I got a kind of a wrap-up question for you. So we are in the middle of October, and we just recently had the floods. And I've watched your Facebook page for a while now, and everything that you were doing. But now, what kind of strain did that put on your resources first, the floods? Because I know that must be devastating, especially for those living in the mountains.
Right. Right. So the floods impacted people on a catastrophic levels, right? Like we saw homes where the water level was just almost above people's heads. And the way that has an impact on the villagers themselves, let's talk about the impact on them first, but because it ultimately then has an impact on us too. But villagers who are laborers, day laborers, for example, were then potentially, like, the fields would have flooded, so they can no longer go to work that day. Or the roads are flooded, so they can't pass and go into the fields that they were working for. Or the flood has seeded, and then now if they don't spend all day cleaning up, then they're going to enter a house in the evening time that is still completely wet and where everything is damp. So then they have to take time off of work in order to clean up, in order to be able to sit somewhere or lay down somewhere that night. So they were losing wages, and in doing so that's the impact on work. But then their motorbike doesn't start because the floods impacted the motors, or they have to, I mean, this is something I think that like not enough people know, but a laborer in the field gets about like $10 to $12 a day. If they have $10 to $12 a day, they don't have savings. And so if their mattress is gone, if their rice cooker is gone, if their phone got wet, if their bike needs repairs, they don't have savings to kind of like help. So if they're now having to, on an emergency basis, repair the motorbike, try to get a new mattress, get new clothes, the dog or the cat that needs food, the dog or the cat that needs any type of medical care is not going to receive it. Right. And so that was one of the concerns that I had. So we're seeing an increase in skin conditions for the animals because the water and the wetness and all the rest. We're seeing upper respiratory issues because like animals are now getting more pneumonias. We're seeing more and more villagers asking for help with dog and cat food. Yeah. So we ordered 100 bags of cat and dog food, and have been delivering that in the last 10 days. We also helped replace as many like mattresses and rice cookers and food for the people just to help them out in that way. But in general, it's a hierarchy, right? So if your ultimate necessity is getting your vehicle started up, it's getting another mattress, then cat food and dog food is not going to be, it's not going to feature in terms of what you can afford with $12 a day. Yeah. So we're trying as best as possible to help with that.
That really puts it in perspective when you look at it from that angle, because you're right, just basic needs have to be met first before they can do those other things. Did you have problems with displacement? A lot of animals being displaced on the floods as well?
So we didn't have a huge amount of problems, at least not that were mentioned to me, so that was good, but we did have several. So there was one, for example, there was a family of dogs. I went there on Monday to vaccinate, so like one mama dog and 7 puppies on the street. And so they were flagged up. So I went to just vaccinate and then gave them worming, flea and tick meds and all the rest, and then I left. And then I got a message that night to say this whole area is expected to flood tonight. Do you think the puppies will be safe? I was like, okay, I'm not sure. And so unfortunately the downpour had just started, and so I couldn't even like drive the little motorbike to try and kind of like check on them. So I was trying to message people in the area, just being like, can you please just be on alert? And so that family of dogs, thankfully, we were able to mobilize and get a foster home. But there was another one, for example, similarly, a dog, nobody knew where it came from, but there was like a rescue vehicle that was supposed to go up and down. The dog had jumped on the back just to get out of the flood. So like the picture that I got was this huge truck, and the water level was like up here covering the wheels, and the dog had just jumped up just to get to safety. Yeah. And they were like, we don't know where it comes from. We can't get the dog off the truck because it's literally water everywhere. Right. And so similarly, like that was another dog that needed to be rescued. And there were, I don't know if you saw, we didn't manage to intervene, but other groups intervened. But there was a dog that was trapped in a cage. So the owners, I don't know if you saw it on the Facebook page. Yeah, right. So sorry, somebody again, kind of like this is the way a lot of the times Thais put purebred dogs in cages, just as a symbol, like a status symbol, but also to keep them safe. Like that's what people don't understand. It's a 10 to 20,000 dog animal. They don't want the dog to get hit by a car. They don't want the dog to go roaming. They don't, so they put it in the cage. But But unfortunately, because of the floods, the dog was trapped in the cage, and so people were concerned about the dog as they were watching the flooding levels kind of like go up. But all the messages that I sent, I was like, what exact part of the area are you in? Because from my understanding was that now the area was accessible only by boat. So I didn't even know, and like I was ready to walk to get to the dog, but you don't even know like how far the water level is.
Right.
And from what I understand, like the authorities were telling everybody, like if you don't have a boat, you can't go. Like you can't start just walking, you know, to be like, we're gonna rescue that.
There's no place to walk.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we tried to source a canoe to go get the dog, and but I think thankfully like we managed to get the owner to move the dog, and so I think in the end, I mean, it was okay as best it could be. But that's what we saw. But others lost their cats. Like the cats, I think, ran off with the flash floods because of the noise level, and they were scared, I think, of the water. And some cats haven't returned.
Looking for higher ground.
Right.
You know, one thing, I thought that was my last thing.
Yeah.
The one thing I forgot to mention is also you try to adopt out as many of these animals as you can.
Yeah.
How does that process work?
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult because a lot of the times people want puppies.
Right.
You know?
That's what I found. Yeah.
Yeah. And but I actually think I think there's like this misconception of like if you love a dog as a puppy, then you can kind of like change it to whatever kind of dog you want.
Yeah.
And I have 40 dogs just at my house, and I
wow.
can tell you that like I'm say mama to like all of them.
Yeah.
And they come into this world with their own unique personality.
Like humans.
And it is misguided sometimes to think like, oh, if you just love on like the little puppy, you'll get to like mold them into like whoever you want them to be.
Right.
I think it actually makes more sense, especially if you want an active dog or non-active dog, or to wait until they've matured to be able to see what type of dog they are.
Right.
But yeah, in general, I do find it quite hard. Most of the time, I almost have to accept that if I'm taking a dog on, it will be for a lifetime.
Right.
And do I have the resources to do that, or do I not? But yeah, people are. So we've created now. We have an adoption center, and that's a small group of dogs. So there's 11 dogs there at the moment. And they're the sweet ones, they're the friendly ones. I mean, we have all of them are quite sweet and friendly, but they're the ones who get along also as a pack. And so until they get adopted, they're just having fun together. And on Saturdays, I open up to the public. So every Saturday, 4 to 6, I'm there, and people can come. And there's never any pressure. What I really want is that there's like a good understanding and a mutual. Like I want the dog to pick off the family, and the family to pick the dog. And so, but yeah, I do try to bring home dogs.
Yeah. So just to wrap it up, the best place for people to watch your journey is Hand to Paw Facebook page.
It's the Almondine Hand to Paw Facebook page. And yeah, we have the Hand to Paw Facebook page as well, so either one. But a lot of the times the Hand to Paw shares out the Almondine Hand to Paw pages.
So if you can send me those links.
Sure.
And also, if some of my viewers, they want to donate, what's the best way to do it? Do you have links through PayPal or Wise?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got Wise, we've got PayPal. We're actually just this week we're setting up as a 501c3 charity, and so people in the U.S. can now donate. Well, they'll be able to donate in about a week to be tax deductible. So that's great. But yeah, Wise, and we've got an account in the U.S. and an account in Thailand. So there's lots of different ways to donate.
And I'll put those links in the description as well if they want to donate. And it's such a good cause. And one of the things that I talk about in my journey here in Thailand is that what I didn't want to do is just come to Thailand and take. And I wanted to give also. And so any opportunity I give anyone else an opportunity to give to such a great organization is really making an impact, and that's what I'm going to do.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So what started as a nice, quiet coffee house has changed. And so we're
The
gonna,
buzz.
I'm gonna have to put closed captions on here as well.
I think, I initially said the coffee shop would probably be better than like the foundation because of the dogs barking in the background. The noise level may be on par.
I think we're gonna get it done nonetheless, because that's why they have closed captions. But thank you so much for your time. Is there anything?
And also like what you talked about too. You see a dog scratching, and you've got here, especially like in Asian countries where dogs are unprotected against fleas and ticks. It's so easy to just be able to carry the medication and to give it to them. And so whatever small acts we can do, it really does add up. And even if it's just one dog, help one case. And I think for us, it's such a little sacrifice, but for them, it can really be the difference between. It can be the difference between a life just full of suffering and scratching and not feeling well compared to a life of just much more peace. Also, just a reminder too that none of the donations at all go towards any salary. So I don't take a salary. I personally pay the housekeeper, so nobody takes a salary. So 100% of the donations go towards medical supplies, dog food, hospitalization costs.
I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you giving us kind of the inside of what's the work that people are putting forth in order to make the quality of life better for the dogs as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.